again, back again, and we're back, back again.
All right, and we are back again. As always, I'm Matt.
I'm Drew.
And this is the Back Again Sequel Podcast. This is the only podcast that takes a sequel from the past and asks the question, was it worth going back again? And today we are doing the follow-up to the 1999 Analyze This, and we are doing Analyze That.
Dr. Sobel, you received a call this morning from Paul Vitti.
Why would you say that I got a call from Paul Vitti?
Because we record all his phone calls from Sing Sing?
Then yes, I did.
Since the last time we saw crime boss Paul Vitti, he's had problems.
I feel pretty, oh so pretty. I feel pretty and witty and bright.
I'm going to release him into your custody.
Mine?
If I find out this was all just a setup, I will hold you totally responsible.
You faked the whole thing. You used me to get you out of prison.
Took you long enough.
That mobster in my house eating off my dishes. Ew.
Now, after 850 days in the slammer, can this man change?
I gotta find a legitimate job.
You want to buy this car? What? Look at the size of that trunk. You can put 3 bodies in there.
Analyze That comes out in 2002, is once again directed by Harold Ramis. It stars Billy Crystal, Robert De Niro, Lisa Kudrow, Joe Vitarelli, and Kathy Moriarty.
Following the events of the first film, mob boss Paul Vitti is nearing the end of his term in Sing Sing, and the FBI agents monitoring him are baffled. Day after day, they watch as New York's most notorious gangland figure walks around his cell in a semi-catatonic stupor. Is Vitti having a nervous breakdown because of recent threats to his life? Or is his odd behavior merely a foxy ploy to get him sprung from jail early?
Before we even start about the plot, which once again, like I said, that's like kind of scraping the surface of it a little bit. I think the reason why this is next on the list is because this is another example of a somewhat comedy classic, because it's bringing together Robert De Niro and
Is it
Billy
a classic?
Crystal. I think it's a somewhat comedy classic.
I've never heard of it.
Well, that's okay. But, you have two powerhouses in Robert De Niro and Billy Crystal coming to be in this. And you also have, I think it was like one of the first times that they were doing some kind of take on like the mob movies, because De Niro obviously is like known for being like the main mob guy throughout like the 80s and the 90s. And then here in 1999, you're like, okay, well, we're going to do another mob story with De Niro, but this time he's like got to go through therapy. And we'll have the contrast of that with, Billy Crystal being like, what's going on here? I'm not in the mob. So for the time, I understand like why it was successful. And even just to quickly go into the budget in the box office of why this is even a sequel, the budget for the first Analyze This in 1999 was $30 million. And they had a box office return of $176.9 million. So that's like pretty good.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean?
Better than it probably should have been.
Yeah, because rewatching it now, I think just to quickly kind of talk about Analyze This, I think the premise is really interesting and funny, but in execution, it's not like that funny of a movie. I don't know, it flowed pretty easily, it just wasn't that funny. And there are some things that don't hold up in regards to like how the characters speak and stuff, obviously.
Yeah. Those were honestly the funniest parts.
Are they? Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's such a smash hit, and then Billy Crystal is even on record saying like the reason that they wanted to do the sequel is because there was like unfinished business between his character and Robert De Niro's character that he thought was warranted to do a sequel. He's like, we got to get some closure, we got to get some finality to it. And after just watching the sequel, in some ways I could see that, just in regards to like their relationship and like where they end up. And also with like Billy Crystal having to like face his issues. So, but
I wasn't getting any unfinished business vibes at all.
Well, they try to, I guess, add more business in the sense of like Ben's gonna.
That's not unfinished business. That's new business.
Well, in theory, because he's never really talking about his father. Like in the first one, he's like, "We're not talking about my father. We're talking about your father." That's what Billy Crystal says. Yeah. In this one, we talk more about Billy Crystal's father.
It's that thing. It's like he said one line about it in the first one, so now we got to make it a whole plot point.
Yeah.
Which it kind of makes sense because it mirrors De Niro's dad, but then De Niro's dad doesn't really have that big of a role in the sequel. De Niro's dad had a role in the first one.
Well, yeah, it's kind of the same thing in the sequel as far as what
they bring it back to his daddy issues.
Yeah.
It's always about. Billy Crystal spends these whole movies like pretending it's such a big deal to analyze Robert De Niro's character.
Yeah.
It's very easy for him to analyze Robert De Niro. It's just all about penises and daddy issues.
Yeah.
And
toxic masculinity.
yeah, so it's, he's a mobster, big surprise.
So even before, like, because I keep saying before, but like before we get more into like the plot, one thing as a whole for this whole Analyze series, if you will, I do think the Analyze verse. I do think they do a good job of like having the conversations, of doing like the therapy. I think those are the most like
they did in the first one, not
they
this
did.
one.
I thought it was okay in the second one with Paul saying that like he wanted to be a cowboy when he grew up. Even though
that was only one scene.
Yeah, it's one scene, but then they also put in the last shot of the movie, they put
that
like
was so stupid.
they put just another flashback frame of him riding away on a horse with his dad dressed as a cowboy. Either way, I thought that they did the therapy scenes like well.
What was the first shot of this movie?
Oh, well, okay, so now we can kind of get into like more so like the beats, whatever. But just in regards to Analyze that, the first shot of this movie is actually a fake out because they are showing you a scene from a fake mobster TV show.
That's the first sequence, yeah.
Yeah, that's the first thing. And then we pull out of that mobster TV show and we see that the inmates are watching it in prison and Paul is one of the inmates and he doesn't want to watch the show because he's actually lived the mob life, right? So this plot takes place a few years after the first Analyze this, and Paul's in prison, and somebody tries to assassinate him while he's in prison.
They move out his cellmate, which just tips Paul off.
Yeah.
Because they're afraid that they're going to shoot his cellmate instead when they could just shoot both of them?
Well, I think the cellmate would probably stay up late and keep an eye out while
You're under
Paul's
the assumption
sleeping.
that this cellmate's like his guard, like Paul's guard.
Well, why else would he be friends with this like big, like they could have had any
schmo. He gets along.
Sure, but they could have had any schmo like kind of like being his cellmate, you know?
I guess, yeah.
So anyway, a dirty guard tries to assassinate Paul while he's sleeping. You know, obviously makes Paul go, okay, I have to get out of prison now because someone's trying to assassinate me. And his way of doing that is to pretend to be crazy. And then briefly, I want to go back because there's a second attempt at assassinating Paul, and it's from another inmate who pulls out a knife in the cafeteria. And what I love about this, assassination attempt is like he's got his shitty like, you know, lunch and he's walking through the tables and a guy just stands up and he goes, "Hey, come here." And then he walks over, then he shows him the knife. He's like, it's almost like he's like,
I thought it was a fake out.
Well, you thought it was a ruse?
I thought that it was going to be a misunderstanding where it's going to be like he's coming over to show him the knife for some stupid fucking reason, but then Robert De Niro attacks him. And he's like, "Well, I just wanted you to sign my knife," or something like that.
He's walking, he accidentally drops his Jello. The guy goes to pick it up, hand it to him, and he thinks that he's going to get stabbed. And but it was just Jello.
But no, it was actually like that's how he goes and attacks people in jail. Is he broadcasts his attack.
Sure, that's his calling card.
Do you want to continue with the sequence because the sequence doesn't end there?
Okay, so either way, there's 2 attempts on his life, and he needs to get out of prison. And the way he's going to do this is he's going to try to prove that he's insane.
So immediately after the second attempt,
yeah, he starts singing a lot of West Side Story songs, and this gets like the FBI and the guards a little bit like, oh, he's losing his mind, so we got to call his shrink back. And then that's how Ben gets back in the picture. And Ben is also going through some stuff right now because his father, who was also a therapist, he's passed away and he's dealing with the grief of losing his father and the
process.
The complicated relationship that they had. Yada, yada, yada. After he goes and examines Paul at the prison, he confirms that he is in fact losing his mind. So the FBI decides to release him for a month under Ben's custody, Billy Crystal, because they have to get him ready for a parole hearing that frankly never happens, to be honest.
That's what they tell Billy Crystal, the cops. Internally, the cops are planning, we know Paul's going to go back to his roots and do his mafia shit.
Yeah.
And then when they literally say this, I'm paraphrasing, but they say something just like this. When they cause a scene and the guns start firing, then we can go in and we can arrest everyone.
Yeah.
So they're essentially, they say this verbatim, they're pouring fire on the gasoline.
They're gasoline on the fire.
They're pouring gasoline on the fire. They're pouring gasoline on the fire.
Paul's the gasoline, the mob is the fire, and if they release him back into the wild, he will go to the mob, and then they can finally...
It'll stir shit up, and then the cops can move in.
Because there's a war going on right now. Because since Paul's been put in prison, it's kind of like every man for himself, or every gang for themselves, and the streets are even more dangerous than they were before, right?
Which you don't really see any of. but we're told
Sure.
shit's dangerous.
So in general, the parole thing was never even was him almost losing his mind, and I'm talking about Paul pretending to lose his mind. Was that even like more convenient for the FBI because they were like, oh great, because we were just going to put him out on the streets after
because they think it's
parole.
really clever. They're like, oh look, this is a problem that we turn into an opportunity.
Okay.
So they think they're hot shit.
Okay. And in general, because I just want to quickly talk about these FBI agents, they are the worst.
And I was thinking they just vanish in like the back half.
There's like a scene later where like they're gonna go out to dinner and the two FBI agents are like kind of watching.
It's like the last time we see them.
Yeah, for a while.
They never came back.
Which is interesting because I'm going to talk a lot about the FBI agents, but just specifically talk about this scene. They're watching Robert De Niro, his girl, Billy Crystal, Lisa Kudrow, all go into this restaurant.
This is when they're trying to talk to the movie
director.
Okay.
Yeah, of the TV show that they were watching.
The movie director of the TV show.
Yeah.
The TV show director.
The TV show director. They're going into this restaurant to go have a meeting with him, and the FBI agents say, all right, they're in the restaurant probably for a while. We're going to go grab some food, and by the time we get back, they'll be done eating. And it's like, what? Why are you?
Stakeout.
It's a stakeout. You bring food with you. You don't leave to get food because they're getting food.
Which is frustrating because it's a comedy movie, but that doesn't seem like intentional comedy.
Yeah. Seeing the plan.
Which, by the way, the assassination attempts, that's a plot point that gets dropped too. This whole thing is just like, because I'm like, at a certain point, he's just there to make the movie.
Yeah.
And so it's like, or the TV show. So it's like, I'm like, was he worried about getting assassinated anymore?
So it jumps around a lot. So we have Robert De Niro faking his insanity to get out of prison and get revenge. On top of that, he's got some kind of beef, not only with the Ragazzis or whatever the mobsters are that put the hit on him, but also with this woman named Patty who's in charge of his family right now.
He doesn't have beef with her. I feel like they keep kind of like wanting him to come back.
Well, it also felt like a red herring situation where I thought maybe she was actually the one that put a hit out on him so that way she could like ultimately take control of the family business.
Yeah.
But after she pops up on the movie set talking to Paul, she disappears from the movie.
Yeah.
And then on top of that, he's got a dynamic with Billy Crystal and the parole board where he is going to try to rejoin society and find a different career.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which gets really tacked on.
Which it's like the middle of the movie, I would say a lot, because we have a lot of fun little scenes where he's like trying to sell a car, trying to work at a restaurant, all these kind of stuff. And then eventually he falls ass backwards into a consultant job on the TV show that he doesn't like, giving advice to the mobsters that work on the TV show. And we're pretty much just going to stay with the TV show for a while.
Because they have to plan a gold heist.
Well, we don't even know that that's even the plan.
So
until
we're
right
going from
act.
faking a mental breakdown to escaping prison to job search and someone's trying to kill me to we're on a movie set and it's a gold heist and
a TV show set.
TV show, it's a gold heist and we forgot that someone's trying to kill us.
And what's so funny about this TV show set is like there's a really long scene that takes place in like Act 2 where they're on the TV show set. This is after De Niro has successfully gotten all his buddies onto the set. And while he's on the movie set, he gets a visit from Patty, and then he gets a visit from the rival gang. And this scene, and then
that's the wrench, right?
Yeah, the wrench. Yeah. And then Billy Crystal shows up on the movie set as well.
Yeah.
It's this long scene where everybody's just stopping by to kind of give their 2 cents to Paul. And it almost felt like, oh, are they trying to like wrap up something before we, or maybe kind of like squash things before we go?
That was the end of Act 2, right?
It was the end of Act 2, yeah.
So we got to wrap everything up before we get into Act 3.
Because at the end of that kind of scene, we have the big car chase with Billy Crystal and Robert De Niro. Like they're getting chased by some mobsters, and then like Billy Crystal throws like a newspaper out the car, and the mobsters go in the river, and then the FBI shows up and says like, "You lost Paul. I put him into your custody." It's like, why? It's not like you put an ankle bracelet on him or anything. Like they just gave this like convicted
they were
criminal.
Tracking him, weren't they?
No, they had the 2 FBI agents staking out the house with no microphones apparently, and they weren't doing anything.
They were following him to the restaurant.
Yeah, they were following the restaurant. So there's a crazy amount of just like ridiculousness in the plot. And now I want to talk about the characters a little bit. I want to start with Lisa Kudrow because Lisa Kudrow literally has no character in the first one or in the second one, but at least in the second one, it's more like business as usual, like, oh, we're just married now and we live in a house and all this kind of stuff. But what baffled me
Well,
about
all she cared about was getting married.
Yeah.
Now that she's got him, all she cared about was marrying Billy Crystal. Now that she's got him, it's just smooth sailing.
Well,
you want to be friends with a mobster? That's fine. We're married.
Yeah.
That's all I care
Well,
about.
she disappears from the movie also. She doesn't even come back in the third act. There's no like...
There's nothing for her character to do, so I was kind of okay with that. I thought it was
Yeah.
a little bit more strange that the FBI agents weren't more present.
Yeah, you know, and Lisa Kudrow is a great actress. She's hilarious. So to put her in this comedy movie and not really have her do anything besides like react in like the fastest way possible,
Or recap scenes.
like it's just kind of like a waste of her talent, right? But in the first one, I just want to bring up this quick thing because there's like a moment where Billy Crystal steps away in the middle of the night and he goes to talk to Robert De Niro like down in like the lower level of like the hotel. And they're having a whole scene. And when Billy Crystal comes back, Lisa Kudrow's woken up and she's like, "Where were you? I couldn't find you. Like, I thought maybe you left and that you didn't want to marry me and all this kind of stuff." He's like, no, I would never leave you. Like, I want to marry you. And it's like, why do you like Billy Crystal?
It should be reversed, where he's desperate to marry her.
Yes.
And she's like kind of like indifferent. It's like the slightest misstep that Paul does,
She's gonna walk.
Exactly.
Because she's way hotter than him.
Then you have your
She's
stakes.
way more successful than him. She's leaving like a TV show job as like a newscaster, as like a reporter in Miami.
To raise his like 15-year-old son.
But no, in every step along the way and analyze this, she just wants to get married. I was excited that like everybody came back for the second one, but my God, like whatever she was in the first one, it's just like half of that in the second one. There's really no point to her. As far as like, you know, Billy Crystal and Robert De Niro go, I do think they have like good chemistry. I understand like why the first one was successful. I thought Billy Crystal was like funnier in the second one, but there's something really weird just about like the whole, "Are you kidding me? This is crazy. There's someone trying to kill us right now. What are we gonna do?" And like, I guess that's like funny the first like 3 times, but when you just watch 2 movies back to back and that's all he's doing is just frantically recapping the crazy thing that just happened to him and how he can't do this. He doesn't want to be a part of this. It gets a little like, you know, repetitive and exhausting.
Yeah.
Right?
They should have done the sequel where Billy Crystal needs Paul for some reason. Because then it's not just Paul constantly dragging him around like the first movie.
Well,
Now Billy Crystal's making proactive decisions.
I did like the fact that Billy Crystal was dealing more with like, I have to deal with my father's death in the second one and how he doesn't have it all figured out. I thought there was a lot of stuff there that you could actually play with, but their resolution to this is just that Billy Crystal needs to like be more violent.
He needs to be more like Paul.
He needs to be more like Paul, but it felt like what they were setting up was since the death of his father, Ben has to decide who he actually wants to be. And if who he has been up until this point is even true to himself.
Yeah.
Does he want to be a therapist? Does he want to be this mild-mannered, polite person? And does he want to have the relationship dynamic with his wife that he currently has, right? And by the end of the movie, we don't really get answers to any of that. He just decides to stay a therapist. We never see Lisa Kudrow again. And the only thing that we realize is that he can punch pretty well.
No, it's okay to have violent outbursts.
Oh, yeah.
That's what the lesson is. It's literally what the lesson is.
Okay. To use that kind of like, what's my job going to be? I want to then now kind of talk about Paul a little bit, because I actually think the strongest point of this movie was Paul trying to rejoin society by doing odd jobs.
He had no motivation to do that though.
But
that's where it lost me, because that was like, and that I think that's also kind of like the opportunity where you have the most leniency for comedy, because like, let's just pick the funniest job. And it's like, he's a used car salesman, so he's pushing way too hard. Those were like the funniest moments, and they were supposed to be the funniest moments, I think, but it's like you need to set up the reason for them to be there more.
Well, it sucks because the reasoning should have been what he said in the movie, but apparently he just didn't mean it, which was after he like talks about wanting to be a cowboy and stuff like that in the therapy session, he's like, I'm all in. I'm going to put in the work. I want to rejoin society. And when he starts seeing the difficulty, like I think the scene where he's trying to sell the jewelry and he's having like an anxiety attack of like, well, this is how I would rob the jewelry store. Like that should have been the whole movie.
Well,
is the struggle.
That should have been, he was worried about getting shot again, like the assassination attempt. I'm like, why is he worried about robbing this place? It's not like he's a kleptomaniac.
I don't think, honestly, we needed a second assassination attempt. And
we didn't need it at all.
At all. Like, I think he could have just did his time He did a really good job in jail. He got parole, and now this is about him trying to rejoin society. And he's only got like, because they do the same thing in the second one with like a time frame, right? In the first one, there's 2 weeks until this big mobster meeting, and he's got to do therapy to get his mind in check so he's ready for this big family mobster meeting. In this one, he's got a month to become sane again so he can go to his parole hearing.
Yeah.
But there's no like big meeting or anything that's taking place. It's all just about...
And he seems happy in prison, aside from the fact that someone's trying to kill him.
Sure,
so it's like, why is he trying to get out necessarily?
But we also don't go to the parole meeting.
Yeah.
The whole month thing becomes irrelevant by the time we get to like end of Act 2.
Can we go ahead and just jump to the third act where they're literally having a conversation where Robert De Niro is telling Billy Crystal just not worry about any of these questions? There's literally a scene in the third act where at the end of all of this, it's the denouement. It is Billy Crystal is talking to Robert De Niro and he is asking perfectly legitimate questions that the audience is probably wondering themselves.
What are you going to do next? What's going to happen?
I think he asks about the parole.
What about the parole board? Yeah. What about the officer?
And Robert De Niro literally just tells them to like shut the fuck up.
Yeah.
I mean, what's next? What do? You go on the run for the rest of your life? Or do you just go back to Sing Sing? Or maybe they just find you dead in an alley? How does this work now?
Those are my choices. Hey, Doc, can't you let me enjoy this for 5 fucking minutes?
Yeah, and Billy Crystal does.
Yeah.
Because that's the perfect like example of this movie where it's just like shut the fuck up and just have fun. Except it's not really fun. Just shut the fuck up and watch the movie.
Well, it's funny because I think even in Analyze This, you could take the arc of a mobster wanting to lead the mob, the same with like Robert De Niro playing mobsters as an actor, right? And then branching out into like different roles. And now we have a movie about a mobster who wants to leave the mob because he wants to just raise a family and have his son be safe. This second one, where's his wife? Where's his son?
De Niro's?
Yeah, De Niro's.
Oh yeah, De Niro's family's missing.
Where's all the people that he decided by the end of the first one that he wanted to like be a family man? What's the natural next step to this?
He's looking for purpose in his life and like he forgot he has a family.
Yeah, and really
I guess I gotta find a job. Don't you have a wife and son?
And it's just weird because I think that what we've seen a lot on the Sequel podcast, movies that actually have a good idea in there, but then they just don't make that the whole movie. They make that like a couple little beats, but then the movie becomes kind of something else. And by the end of this Analyze That, they're gonna rob a bunch of gold bars from like a federal like reserve truck, and then they are going to frame the rival mob family that they're the ones that actually stole these gold bars. That way they go to prison, and now there's no more war in New York. And at the end of the movie, the mafia war, and the FBI is like, oh, like the streets are safer in New York now because whatever. But it's like Paul's family's still living in New York doing mob stuff.
Well, I think that was supposed to be like tongue-in-cheek because those were the incompetent FBI agents who were just like, their plan is just like, oh, when the fire's big enough, we'll know where it is so we can put it out.
Yeah.
So now he's just like, and now because we stepped in and did our job, the streets are safe. It's just, he's like a dumb.
But they didn't even like do anything because like.
No, it's flat, but that's what I think the intention was.
But I'm saying like they didn't even follow Paul to like do this thing. Like in the first movie, all the FBI agents show up to the big mobster meeting and they're able to arrest like all these heads of all these families.
So you're saying the FBI didn't even try to do something?
They didn't even do anything in the second one. Like in the second one, the people that are transferring
Weren't they shooting at them?
Well, those were the people that were transferring the gold bars.
Oh.
But yeah, I mean, by the end of this movie, it's obvious that Paul hasn't learned anything, but him and Jelly just walk off into the sunset and it's like, well, what is he gonna do now? What's gonna happen?
He's gonna be a cowboy. That's what the last shot
Yeah, the last shot of the movie is a memory of him riding a horse with his dad as a cowboy.
I hate that, where it's just like, well, I wanted to be a cowboy when I was a kid. It's like, all right, we should try being a used car salesman.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would say from the front half of this movie, I actually thought that it was like a decent sequel. I thought that they were actually like, okay,
the whole
like
front half.
Just the front half in general. I was like, oh, okay, like this is what we're doing. This is blah blah blah. By the time we get to like him planning like a gold heist, I was like, what are we doing? He's just doing crime again. You know, and it's not even like
he's not even doing like mafia crime. He's doing like.
It would have made more sense as if he attempted to do this regular life job stuff. It wasn't working out, and then he felt like he had to go back and do this crime stuff. But then when he starts doing the crime, he has a panic attack and he can't go through with it.
Yeah.
Very similar to the first movie where he's gonna go kill Billy Crystal because he thinks he's working with the
Mm.
FBI. Then he has a mental breakdown. People show up, they're shooting, and then Billy Crystal's like, come on, Paul, like kill him, but he can't because he's like crying and laying on the
Yeah.
floor. They try to do something similar in the second one where...
But it's stupid because Billy Crystal is the one who's like provoking it. It's not De Niro having his own breakthrough.
And then after they both cry, and then Jelly walks in, they just wipe their tears, and then they just go on with the heist.
It was funny because I remember it was like during that moment, it was like, oh yeah, that was kind of what the first one was about.
Yeah.
Was it's like those breakthrough moments, and then they like to hide it from like the mob.
Yeah.
And it's like you really lose all those fun little dynamics in the sequel because they don't matter anymore.
It feels
There's
like
no reason for De Niro and Billy Crystal to hide their professional relationship from the mob anymore because now everyone knows.
It feels like the first one is about how therapy can help anybody, and how it's never too late to change your life. Let's just say that's what the first one's about.
Well, I think that's what the second one should have been about.
Well, the second one is about nothing.
Yeah. I wouldn't say the first one's about it's never too late to change your life. I would say it's more so about therapy can benefit.
Well, it's a little bit about that because he is the head of this mobster family, and he thinks that he needs to just do therapy in order to get his mind right so he can go back to being like, the head of the family. But really what he decides at the end of the therapy is that I need to leave the mobster family.
Okay, I guess at the end.
That's what I'm.
So
that's the arc.
it's not a theme that the movie's about. It's a theme that comes into play at the end.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right. So when you get to the end of this one, you would think that we would have something similar of a next step of resolution with that, but no, they just sing West Side Story on the bridge, and it's bye-bye, and then we just cut to bloopers. I feel like movies cut to bloopers in the credits when it's like, this movie was so shitty, we have to at least show people that we had a good time.
Exactly. Yeah.
It.
It's almost like it's like the treat for sticking around. It's like, hey, thanks for watching the whole thing. Here's some fun.
Help me.
So like I said earlier, the budget in the box office for the first one was $30 million budget and then $176.9 million. With the second one, they have a budget, it doubles like every sequel. Now they have a budget of $60 million and they only make $55 million back at the box office.
Yep. You want to do Rotten Tomatoes scores?
Sure. The first one, Analyze This, has a Rotten Tomatoes score of 69%.
Nice.
And the second one, I believe, has a 27%. I will say that the one joke that I actually thought was funny in the second one was, and I forget I think it's Robert De Niro's dream.
Yeah.
Where he's got like the sword and Billy Crystal's Freud, and he's like, ha, 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 ha. He's like doing like weird faces. Like that whole dream sequence was really funny, but I also thought it was setting up that Patty was gonna ultimately be the villain because the sword that he has that's like looping and stuff, he's drawing that to Patty and his family.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And that's the thing is there are a couple, I guess they're surreal, like dream sequences in the first one. There are a couple, I think only one is shown, another one's like talked about. But they always come back to, they have a meaning to what's happening in the plot.
Mm-hmm.
That dream sequence was great and it was surreal, but it had no connection back to the plot.
No.
They should have done more of those like surreal comedy moments and then had them tied. That should have been like almost instead of like the job search.
Yeah.
Is like do 3 different dreams or visions.
I will say, out of all the sequels that we've done, I do really appreciate the fact that this is called Analyze That.
Yeah, the
this or that. The title's good.
Yo. You're good, you.
I'm
Yes, you
okay.
are. No. You're very, very good. You got a gift, my
Nah,
friend. I'm telling you. You got a gift.
Right.
So as always on this podcast, we ask 3 questions that lead to a final vote of was it worth going back again? And the first question is, does it work as a sequel?
Nope. What sucks is that we address these questions when we're talking about them.
Yeah.
Because they are so big. So it feels like a recap. But it's
It
like,
does.
no, clearly, because, I mean, the big thing for me is always the characters. They always do that. They always like the first movie ends, and then what they do is when they start the sequel, they pretend the climax to the first movie didn't happen. And these characters hadn't gone through their changes. And they do that in this too, where they pretend that De Niro wants to still be in the mob, and the whole point of the first movie wasn't even trying to get out. So yeah, they regress his character and they don't give Billy Crystal hardly anything to do, which they needed to do because the De Niro character was already kind of done.
Yeah, I think
explored.
I think the second half of this movie made it not work as a sequel. I think the first half of this movie had the potential, like when he was doing the odd jobs and everything, I was like, this is working as a sequel. Actually, like we're actually growing. And then when he's talking, that whole therapy scene where he talks about his dad and what he wanted for him, but after he was assassinated, he had no choice. He had to join the mob.
He was whacked.
He was whacked. This sequel is whack, I'll tell you that. I think that the front half had a lot of potential to work as a sequel, and then this whole gold heist thing just really kind of like final nail in the coffin. So no, I don't think it worked as a sequel either. All right, so that sounds like it's gonna get 2 X's. So the next question is it enjoyable / entertaining? I'll start off this one, and we've definitely watched movies that are not as enjoying / entertaining. Like, was it the funniest movie in the world? No. Was it like directed poorly? No. But I don't know. I'm kind of like, I'm truly 50-50 on it. I wasn't bored. I wasn't like irritated and annoyed waiting for it to be over. I do think the charisma of Billy Crystal and Robert De Niro do really like carry this franchise, and you really need them as well. I guess I'll be generous and I'll give it a check and I'll say it's enjoyable / entertaining, but just like 51-49. Like by no means like a strong check.
I'm too, like, I could see like there were moments that I thought were funny, but that's just not enough because I feel like it's more dependent on things like structure. And the things that I thought were just barely funny enough, like, oh, that surreal dream sequence was funny, are like the lowest boxes to check. It's like you have more important boxes you need to check that this movie did not.
Yeah.
The big thing was character and structure. And yeah.
I really can't believe that I didn't even think about his son and his wife until we started recording
Yeah.
this. That really bothers me.
Yeah. Because the whole thing is like his father-son relationship, and now it's like he's just neglecting
his son. You fucking idiot. So that sounds like it's going to get a check and an X. So the last question is going to be, does it need to exist? I don't think it needs to exist. It's not adding anything to the world, and honestly, everything you needed to do with that premise, they did in the first one. So
neither do I. I think the concept is so flimsy of just relying on the neurotic psychiatrist and the mobster chauvinist, I guess. That I think you barely have enough there to make one movie work.
Yeah.
So it's like, okay, they're going to stretch it into a sequel and they're not going to do any additional work. It's not going to work.
Yeah.
So no, something like that does not need to exist.
No. So if you're doing that math at home, that's going to get 5 X's and 1 check. So it's going to get 1 giant X for not worth going back again. And yeah, it's just another one bites the dust. I looked at the sequel and I was like, you sucked. You're not good. You're not good. As always, thanks everybody for listening. If you like this episode, you can listen to all these episodes available wherever you listen to podcasts, or you can watch these episodes with video reviews. Just subscribe to wag.productions on YouTube, and you can also follow us on our Patreon page, which is just patreon.com/wagproductions. And outside of that, you got anything else to add, Drew?
I can't take it anymore!
All right, we will see you next time.